Hey guys, how are you doing? So, we are here for the official start of our 2024 season, right? So, I promised myself that we are going to be doing more podcasts and some more videos in between. So, whether you are listening or you are watching, know that you're about to see a lot more of me this year. As you can even see from my background, I'm not even in my regular place. I'm actually at my in laws traveling still, but I wanted to hop in and do a quick episode because this was coming up on my mind, and y'all know how it go. When it comes up in my mind, it winds up in my contents, and often I get other little signals to go with this. I got all the above this time. It was on my mind, and then I started getting these signals. Right? So originally, if you read the episode title, it talks about Stanley and Nokia. I forgot exactly how I named it, but either way, it talks about Stanley and Nokia. Originally, this was the episode title was going to be, is your content too selfish? Sometimes that's the case, but all of a sudden I started seeing all these posts about Stanley and Nokia, and it just made a much better example. But we'll still talk about your content being a little too selfish. So stick with me here. So if you've not been online and seeing all these things, or if you're listening to this when that little buzz is gone, because you know how it goes. There's two really big, important. They are really good lesson stories going on right now that are like circling the web, right? First one is from Nokia. You guys remember Nokia? They used to make the flip phones, and when everybody started getting smaller phones, and they started getting small, 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 they were all Nokias, and then they had like this like the little pill looking one that was a Nokia. If you're from the New York, New Jersey area, you remember at one point in time the Nokia theater was right in Manhattan. It's actually the last place I saw De La Soul. That's a whole nother story. But I went to go see De La Soul at the Nokia theater, right? So at one point in time, Nokia was a big, big buzz, right? Well, Nokia didn't fare too well. Nokia is not doing too well, and I think as of the release of this, they may have already officially gone bankrupt and closed. And so there's a post going around talking about, it's a quote from the CEO of Nokia, and he says, actually very like I'm touched just talking to you guys about it. But in the post, he says, we didn't do anything wrong, but we still lost, right? And it has like a picture of him with his head like on his hands, looking real worried at the podium. And if you actually click the link and read the post, read the article, I always click the link and read the whole thing. I know some people don't do that, but I do, right? But if you actually clicked and read the whole thing, he goes on to say how, well, it goes on to talk about how they just didn't innovate fast enough. They just didn't do anything fast enough. They didn't, everything came out with the iPhones and the Samsung, and it became a race between those two. And Nokia just got lost in the dust and blah, 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 blah. A lot of controversy there. Then at the same time, happening on the other side of the web, if we can say it like that, right? On the other side of the web, there is a big buzz going on about Stanley cups. I wish I had one around here to show you guys. But Stanley cups are these really good insulated cups. So if you drink coffee, or if you like ice and you like your stuff to stay like cold all day long, you want or like hot or cold, you want a Stanley cup. It's about like, we at my family, we use Yetis, right? So it's about on par with Yeti of, it can keep your things cold or hot for hours, like 10, 15, 20 hours. I think Stanley's the one that recently, which I think is where this buzz started coming from. There was a woman who had a car fire and the cup survived. And so the guy gave her a new car or something like that. He said he's not doing that again. So don't go burn up your cars for no cups. But overall, so there's another post going on about Stanley cups, and not only about the fire and all that other type of thing and how they're durable and all this other type of stuff, but also how they've recently pivoted their audience. So they used to be mostly for like the working man, and I say literally with air quotes, not that they were being sexist, but that was their audience, right? So like construction workers who are generally outside all day and don't have time to go in and out and that kind of thing, or truck drivers who just need their drinks to be ready and cold, throughout the day. So it used to be kind of geared towards that type of industry, that type of guy, right? And recently, and I don't know if it's because of the car thing or what exactly happened, but some TikTokers, you know how TikTokers do, love us, right? Got hold of these Stanley cups, and they are now becoming like for the mom who's running around, or for the girl who's on her way to wherever, right? So they kind of got a really big like cult fiction kind of, not fiction, but culty kind of buzz amongst women. And so instead of Stanley doubling down on being what they were, they started coming out with newer colors. There's a whole bunch of colors that are have just launched. Like I just saw one for magenta, one for coral. There's a cute yellow one that I like that's kind of cute with a little pattern at the bottom. And that tells you, I'm like, I like it. That means they're doing the right thing, right? And so now this 110-year-old brand, Stanley, has revamped a little bit of who they are, not by changing their product. They didn't change their product. They literally just changed their audience, and not even on purpose, but they listened to the audience that was now looking at them. And now they're starting with lines that are more appealing to them. So first they started with the marketing, which was kind of smart. Here's our white cup that we already had, and let's see if you like it, if we give more reasons for you to like it, like as a woman, right? And then when they saw that that worked, they now have pivoted that into, let's now even give you more things that you would like. So by doing pastel colors and more colorful colors, a little bit more feminine, that kind of thing. And I don't say this to be sexist. I know there's men who like these and women who like that, but in marketing, you got to kind of check off some assumptions, right? So they started leaning into those assumptions a little bit more, and purposely, right? Purposely gearing it towards, which also means putting their marketing in different places. You're not gonna only market and on the football games when maybe moms who might be watching Grey's Anatomy, right? Analogies, or whatever I'm putting them in, right? Stereotypes a little bit. But that's what they did. And so that is now like a resurgence in their brand, a resurgence in their sales. It's super smart because they're now getting a whole audience that literally, it's not even like they're trying to get more of the market share of the male working, on in the fields, not like the field meal, but the fields audience, right? It's not even like they're just trying to get that audience, but now they're appealing to just a completely different audience, right? So they have the potential to expand, like to double and triple their size. And so that's what they're doing. And it's funny because someone posted about the whole Stanley Cup thing. And I said, well, I guess Nokia should have listened to them. Because if a Nokia had understood their audience, right, and done some of that pivoting, or not even understood their audience, but others understood their other uses, right? And other people that might be interested and did some of the pivoting, then maybe they would be not holding their hands and looking sad. And I'll tell you guys another brand that has done very similar to this on a much, they were on a larger scale, but now a much smaller scale is Blackberry, which I think they were brought out by somebody. So my facts might be a little fuzzy on this one, but Blackberry, very similar. If you guys remember Blackberries, they had the phones. They were actually one of the first ones to come out with like a full. I had a Blackberry Bold with the full like touchscreen kind of phone thing, right? Was it a Bold or was it a? It was the Bold and it was the Storm. It was the Storm that was the one that like had no buttons and that kind of thing. They were one of the first people to do that. And now they're one of the never people to ever see them again, right? But they had two really primary audiences at BlackBerry. They were, yes, they had some consumer wide phones and stuff like that on regular like Verizon, stuff like that you can get. And they had done really well at positioning themselves as the corporate phone, right? Because they had an internal network and you could have phones that were easier to track corporate wise, and they could see what you're doing. They could push out notifications, they could push out applications, they could do all these things. I used to work in this area of tech for a little bit. I can just tell you some of the things they could do a lot of things, right? So they could do some things that made them really, really good for corporate contracts where you want people to have phones, but you don't want them to use them as their own phone. And, because it had that easeability of typing, because they were the first ones with the little keyboard, like a full keyboard on the phone, because it could do stuff like that, it was better for things like email and all of this. This is all pre-smartphone. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, just know I'm that old, right? Which is really not that old. I think like this is really about 15 years ago at the most, 10, 15 years ago. So eventually, as our phones got better and smarter and the consumer phones got better, iPhones came out, Samsung's, Nokia was part of this push out of BlackBerry, which is funny enough, right? Then they lost that market. They no longer were the phone. They actually stopped selling and making phones. But most people don't know that they still exist in a much smaller faction, but they still exist as a software company, because now if you have, I think it's called something good network good something like that. A lot of corporations, I know when I used to work for a major corporation, we had this, and this was only like 2 years ago, so it's not like a long time ago. But a lot of corporations now use this to deliver secure mail. So instead of having mail pushed directly to your phones, you have this app, and it's a suite of apps. It's like mail, passwords, documents. So you think like banks, hospitals, people that need to keep things like super, super secure. Now they have an app that you can install that allows you to log in and get your mail and all that stuff in a very secure way. And that app is controlled or made by the old Blackberry people, right? Which I don't know if it's still Research in Motion was the name of the original company. I don't know if it's still that company, but it's still from Blackberry, right? So it's still like very small, small, small print. Says something about Blackberry, right? Or in the fine print, says something about Blackberry. So they pivoted. Now, granted, their pivot probably wasn't as good as Stanley's because they had to not only change, but now they're going after a much smaller market, but it's still good enough to be profitable because corporations in themselves, there might be less customers, but they're much larger contracts. So if you get one customer that's got 10,000 devices that they need to have secure mail on, boom, you got a pretty good market share there. So not exactly the same, but similar enough to what Stanley is doing. But the most important part of all of this, which is where I'm going with this episode, is that they started listening and paying attention to what's changing, what's moving, and what's innovating, and listening and paying attention to their audience or potential audiences, right? You don't only have to listen to your audience. So that's why I wanted to open up this episode, open up this season, and even open up this year talking about, because I think a lot of this is going to happen, right? With AI, AI already, and I can tell you guys know my SEO assist stories that AI took my app for a loop. I'm even looking at what are other ways I can bring things in. And I did pretty good. SEO assist had a great year. We'll be talking about that in another episode. But this is something we all need to talk about, all need to think about, no matter what industry you are in. You need to start thinking about how can I get into either another market or make this so niche and listen to what my market is looking for. So like in BlackBerry's case, they didn't even get into another market. They just paid more attention to their corporate clients, right? You were already using my phones. You don't need my phones anymore, but what do you still need from me, right? What is the main reason you were using my phone? So now let me use that to say, this is the thing that I can give you for you to still be able to use my service, right? And use it on other phones. And we make my service that you really, really needed and wanted more available on other phones. Stanley said, hey, we got the same cups. They got the same, like their thing for cups is that it's durable, is that it holds your drink. You don't have to keep going back and forth. You don't have to have a cold drink if it's supposed to be hot or a hot drink if it's supposed to be cold, right? That same durability. Who else needs a really, really durable drink, right? Moms, when you're at the soccer practice, taking the kids back and forth, blah, blah, blah. I know I've made some coffee and gone off to do all the things and came back and my coffee was cold and I was not happy. Right? So it's like, what else can we do? People working from home, even though we're working from home now, we still don't want to keep running back and forth. And depending on if your office is upstairs or downstairs, my office happens to be next to the kitchen when I'm home. But like now, I'm not home, right? Even if I'm in a hotel, if I want to grab my coffee, have some meetings, I ain't got to worry about it being, cold by the time it's done. My husband, he has a Yeti, but he loves like putting his ice in the cup. We take road trips and stuff, and it lasts throughout the entire road trip. So think about that. Think about where else can I position my products? And so this is how we got to our original topic, right? I want you guys to think about in your content. Too many times I see people's content that is only talking about the topics that they want to talk about, the topics that they feel comfortable with, the topics they think their audience needs or they want their audience to need, but not really listening to their audience, right? Not really listening. So that's where the whole selfish topic comes in. You guys know with SEO Assist and with everything I do with SEO, we do a lot of looking at what are people searching for, right? SEO Assist gives you topics, that ideas that you can use and now go out, and it's based on what people are searching for. You know how many times I give people this thing and they're like, nah, I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, but my audience is different. When meanwhile, you may think that's what your audience is different, but your audience really has these questions. And we know this because they search for them, right? And or like Stanley, you could be ignoring a whole audience, a bigger audience that is searching for it, right? I have to go through this conversation with many, many people because they come in the door thinking what my audience wants. And honestly, I'm gonna be real with y'all. If you knew your audience so well, you probably wouldn't need me at all. No. No, and I'm good with that, right? That means you got it down pat, right? It means your business is flourishing, you're thriving. You don't need that extra traffic because you're so busy, right? That is rarely the case, right? And that is why we still have a show, why we still have a company, right? Rarely the case. The case usually is that you need different ways to get traffic. And sometimes those different ways mean stepping outside of yourself. I always say SEO is one of the most selfless things that I probably have ever done in my life, right? I didn't even realize I was getting into it, but it's no longer listening to me and what I think. It's more listening to my audience and what do they think and what do they need and what's going on with them, and then answering those questions. So whether it's being in groups and paying attention to what people are posting, whether it's using a tool like SEO Assist that's going to give you topic ideas, interview questions, search topics, all those things based on what people are actually putting out on the internet right now, whether it's, actually interviewing some people. Hey, you're my client. What do you need? What do you think? What do you want? Do you have some friends I can talk to? Because it's so important to take, when you're doing marketing overall, whether you're doing it with content marketing or ad marketing or anything, but take you and your thoughts out of the equation. You know how to serve and help your current people. What's the most important thing is who to serve your next people. And they may not need the same things that your current people need, especially, like I said, back with times are changing. Now we've got AI. People don't need just how to write like they used to, because now it's like if I give an idea, then AI is going to do all the rest for me. And it's not always that bad, right? But sometimes they still need to know, what kind of ideas do I give AI? What kind of things should I be putting in there? How do I even know that AI is good? So just with AI alone, the questions that people are asking have completely pivoted and completely changed. And so if my content was all still about here, I'm going to give you how to write, how to write, how to write, people would be like, well, I don't need to know how to write. I need to know what to write. I need to know if what I'm writing or getting, because didn't actually write it, is correct. I need to know if I can just use this as it is or if I need to do something else with it. And so that's more now the questions that are happening now. Same thing with, the change in the economy, the change in inflation. I have another friend who's got a app that's really good for, or has to do with HR stuff, right? So it has to do with employments, HR. Well, right now, people aren't hiring like they were a year or two ago, right? Or 3 years ago, right? They aren't hiring that way. So now it's like, is it more about getting new people or keeping existing people? That might be a better question to answer, because that's the question that people are asking right now. That's what your HR folks are trying to, or how to get people to do more, or skilled up enough to do more. That's what they're trying to do right now, because right now they're not hiring as much. Inflation. No longer is anyone, like, we just went through the holidays, trying to do the most extravagant meal. Now more the questions are, how do I do the best meal with the less? Who's got these ingredients for less, right? Like, I just spent some time with my mother-in-law's, and she sits there with the papers like, who's got this cheaper, that cheaper, that cheaper, right? That's back to where people are going. I'm ready to see this resurgence of couponing. Y'all remember, like, right before the like 2 years before the pandemic, and everybody's extreme couponers and all of that, and then people were like, oh, I got money, I'm not really gonna do all that work. People are about to start doing that work again. Right? Because prices have gotten so high that money that you had is now not stretching as long, and so people are going to start like looking into that again. So I would even go back to some of those topics if you're that in that kind of industry. But think about in your industry, right? Whether, like I said, whether you got a tool or you're doing it on your own, think about in your industry. Also think about what you're writing right now. I saw a few posts because the end of the year, people saying, you want topic ideas? Go back to what did well in 2023 and what people were struggling with in 2023, and talk about that. And I want to be like, no, right? But I do try not to be that person on other people's posts. So I just said no silently and put it in the back of my head and knew I was going to do an episode with you guys. But I wanted to say no and almost scream, because pretty much they're telling them, forget what's going on right now. Go back to a year or two ago and start talking to the old them, or start talking to them when they're not your people anymore, right? So you want to think, what is the new them? What is the them that's now need? That now, what do they need, right? Or who else can I be talking to? I talk about content creation a lot for entrepreneurs, but even as I'm growing my SaaS, I realize that SaaS businesses need content too, and might actually have a little bit more sustainability to do something like bring something like someone like me in. Or since they understand technology, they're willing to use a tool like SEO Assist to bring that in. So I'm starting to look at not just my existing audience or what else do you need, which I'm going to ask you, what else do y'all need? Right. But I'm also starting to look at who else needs this. Who else should I be tapping into? Because the new business entrepreneur person that might be shrinking. We saw that in last year. Another prediction for this year is that more people are going to go back to 9 to 5s. And now some people think people are going to go back to 9 to 5s, and as a result of going back to 9 to 5, they're still going to be working on their business. But there are some people who are just going to go back to 9 to 5s and stay there and be happy there. They're going to say, this didn't work for me, and I'm just going to go back and resume my career. Or they're going to say, I learned all these skills as an entrepreneur that I can now go and get a job, be better qualified for a job that I wasn't qualified for before. And they may not never return to entrepreneurship. And that's perfectly fine. But me as a business trying to attract them, I need to pay attention. I need to talk more about the transferable skills. Just recently, I did a training on Canva, and I did the training for my sorority. So we made it open to the community. And in my mind, we were doing it for community organizations and businesses. But so many people came back to me and were in the chat talking about they're going to use this at work. So now I'm thinking, whoa, this isn't just what I can do for entrepreneurs, but what can I do to help people who are upskilling in their 9 to 5s, who are now need to use these different technologies that I've been perfecting and using and training and working with for years. This is now new to them. Maybe that's an example of something I can now get out there and do. Moral of the story, if we haven't learned it from, well, Nokia didn't learn it themselves, so we're not going to learn from them, but we learned what happens when you don't listen from Nokia, right? If we haven't learned that we need to listen from Nokia, we learn how much and how effective it can be to listen from Stanley. And then we learned how at least you can keep yourself afloat if you listen like Blackberry. Listen to me and saying that you need to be less selfish in your content. You need to think, what do they need? What do they want? And what is going on now? And the trends that are moving forward. Don't go looking back. When you read that person telling you to look back to 2023, 2022 content, that is not effective, because especially in those last 5 years, like since the pandemic really accelerated a lot, business content thought wise, right? People aren't remaining on the same thoughts for years as they used to. Now things are good now, and this isn't just like your trendy, like what's happening with Cardi B and Offset kind of stuff, right? This is how I'm thinking of my career, how I'm thinking about where I live, how am I thinking about grocery shopping, how am I thinking about childcare. Because there's so much information out there, people's mindsets and thoughts on these things are changing and growing rapidly, right? They're no longer contemplating for a very long time. They're moving, moving, moving. Even if they try to think on something for a very long time, something else pops up in their feed and diverts their attention, right? Alex Ramosi said this in his most recent book about people don't have a lack of attention span problem. When people said, oh, there's only a 7-second attention span. People don't have an attention span problem. What they have, or what we have, is quality content problem. The fact that someone will binge, and this is my add on to his thing, the fact that somebody will binge a Netflix series for 8 hours tells you they don't have a lack of attention span. That just means your content is not good enough to watch for 8 hours, right? And part of that is because, again, you're not listening to how things are changing. Even in that, the Netflix binging thing, I probably should do a whole episode on that. People no longer, like, I watched The Gilded Age, which I love. It was horrible for me to have to wait every single week. And that's because HBO has not caught up. They do not care that we now want to see everything in 1 to 2 days. I need a weekend with this right now. And they are still giving us things 1 week at a time. And it is killing them, and it's killing us, right? We're killing us and killing them. Either way, we're dying over here. If y'all listening over at the HBO Max, folks. But I can foresee them having some problems too because of how they're not innovating with the way people want to consume content. People are just going to stop coming back week after week. Or, like I've seen people say, I wait until the whole series is over, which means they don't get that live viewership numbers, which is or like first week viewership numbers, which is very important for some of their advertising and stuff. So, we're not going to go into that. But the moral of the story here is, y'all hear me? Say it with me. Listen to your audience. Be less selfish, right? And listen to where they're going forward. Don't at all look back. So, hopefully, you guys enjoyed this episode. Hopefully, this is a great start to your new year, just a message you needed. If you love it, I'm bringing in some more interviews this year. If you are watching the video, subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. Not only are you guys going to get the podcast stuff or some of the podcast stuff, the good stuff, right? Not only are you going to get that, but you're also going to start getting more tips, tools, training. I've got a couple of tools I've already done some videos on that I'm going to be showing you guys some of the things that I'm using, more about SEO assist because you should be using that too, right? And if you just want to hang out, talk to me in the comments and I will see you there. Bye guys.